There is a company you have probably never heard of that controls more than $9 trillion in assets. $9 trillion. That is more money than the entire economies of Germany, Japan, and India combined. A company that is the largest single shareholder in Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Tesla, Nvidia, Exxon, Pfizer, and 495 other companies in the S&P 500. A company that owns 8.7% of BlackRock itself, the very company everyone screams owns everything. A company that quietly votes every single share in your 401k, your pension fund, your Roth IRA, and your child's college savings plan. You think you own stock? You don't. Vanguard owns the stock. Vanguard votes the stock. You own a claim on paper. You own nothing. Vanguard owns everything. This is not conspiracy theory. This is market structure. In 1975, Vanguard did not exist. Today, it is the most dangerous financial entity in human history. More powerful than any bank that has ever existed. More powerful than any monopoly the world has ever seen. Because Vanguard does not just manage money. It owns ownership itself. And ownership is power. Let me show you exactly how Vanguard became the silent monster that actually owns BlackRock and everything else. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. First, you need to understand what Vanguard actually is. Most people think it's just another asset manager like BlackRock or State Street. It is not. Vanguard is the only major financial institution on Earth that is technically owned by its own funds. The funds own Vanguard, and the investors own the funds. That sounds democratic. It sounds fair. It sounds like the little guy finally won. It is the perfect disguise. Because this mutual structure means Vanguard claims it has no external shareholders, no profit motive, no need to maximize anything except investor interest. So it can charge the lowest fees in history, sometimes 0.03%. Those microscopic fees did something no one predicted. They triggered the greatest avalanche of money in financial history. As of 2025, Vanguard manages $9.2 trillion. $9.2 trillion. More than the GDP of every country on Earth except the United States and China. One company, $9.2 trillion. Perfectly legal. And growing faster than any empire that came before it. Let me put Vanguard side by side with the three greatest monopolies in history so you understand why Vanguard is different and infinitely more dangerous. First, Standard Oil, 1870 to 1911. John D. Rockefeller controlled 91% of all oil refining in America. He owned the wells, the pipelines, the refineries, the rail cars, the gas stations. A vertical, visible monopoly that crushed every competitor and dictated the price of kerosene for an entire nation. In 1911, the Supreme Court broke it into 34 pieces. One industry. One man. Eventually illegal. Second, the J.P. Morgan Money Trust, 1890s to 1912. J.P. Morgan and a handful of bankers sat on the boards of U.S. Steel, General Electric, AT&T, and 280 other corporations. They controlled railroads, electricity, telephones, banking, everything that moved the industrial age. The 1912 Pujo Committee exposed it. Morgan's group controlled companies worth $22 billion, more than the entire U.S. money supply at the time. Congress passed the Clayton Act. Interlocking directorates were banned. The empire was dismantled. Direct, personal control. Eventually illegal. Third, IG Farben, 1925 to 1945. The German chemical cartel that grew so large it produced synthetic fuel, rubber, explosives, and Zyklon B for the concentration camps. By 1939, it controlled 90% of Germany's chemicals and dyes. It helped finance Hitler's rise and became a political actor more powerful than most government ministries. After the war, the Allies shattered it into BASF, Bayer, and Hoechst. One industry, one cartel, eventually criminal. Now look at Vanguard. Standard Oil controlled 91% of one industry. Vanguard controls 8 to 9% of every industry. J.P. Morgan put his men on corporate boards. Vanguard doesn't need to. It owns the shares and votes the proxies automatically. IG Farben was a visible cartel that horrified the world. Vanguard is praised as the champion of the little guy, the hero of low fees, the good guy of Wall Street. Standard Oil was broken up. Morgan's trust was outlawed. IG Farben was dissolved as a war crime. Vanguard, perfectly legal. Celebrated. Growing. The monopoly that's legal. The power that's invisible until you see it. And once you see it, you realize every previous monopoly was amateur hour. Because Rockefeller, Morgan, and Farben only wanted to own one thing at a time. Vanguard owns everything at once. And it did it with your money. Now, the 5 mechanisms through which Vanguard actually owns BlackRock and everything else. These are not opinions. These are structural, documented, public facts. Mechanism 1. Common ownership on steroids. As of Q3 2025, Vanguard is the largest single shareholder in 488 of the S&P 500 companies. Apple, 8.9%; Microsoft, 8.7%; Google, 8.5%; Amazon, 8.2%; Nvidia, 8.8%; Tesla, 8.4%; JP Morgan Chase, 8.8%; Exxon, 8.6%; Pfizer, 9.1%; Johnson & Johnson, 9%. And the one that breaks people's brains, BlackRock, 8.7%. Vanguard owns more of BlackRock than any other entity on Earth. The monster everyone blames for owning everything is itself owned by a bigger monster. When one institution owns 8 to 9% of every major competitor in every sector, competition becomes optional. Delta, United, American, Vanguard is top shareholder in all 3. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, same. Pfizer, Merck, Eli Lilly, same. Academic studies already prove the effect. A 2019 paper by Jose Azar, Sahil Rana, and Martin Schmalz showed common ownership increases airline ticket prices by 48%. A 2022 study found banking sectors with high Vanguard/BlackRock ownership charge customers 5 to 10% higher net fees. Prescription drugs? 12% higher on average. Why? Because when the same owner sits on both sides of every competition, the rational move is to stop competing. Keep prices high. Keep margins fat. Keep the index rising. The owner wins no matter who wins the fake race. This is monopoly by proxy. Perfectly legal. Mechanism 2. The greatest proxy voting weapon ever built. You buy 1 share of VO, Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF. You technically own a fraction of 500 companies, but you do not get to vote those shares. Ever. Vanguard votes them for you. In 2024 alone, Vanguard cast 172 million proxy votes at over 13,000 shareholder meetings worldwide. 172 million votes. More votes than the entire population of Russia. Vanguard decides who sits on the board of Apple, who becomes CEO of JP Morgan, whether Exxon increases dividends or spends billions on green energy, whether Pfizer's executives get another $100 million bonus, whether Amazon recognizes a union or not. All of it. And because Vanguard is mutually owned, it claims it is simply acting in the best interest of fund shareholders. But who defines best interest? 12 people on Vanguard's investment stewardship team in Malvern, Pennsylvania. 12 unelected individuals control more corporate votes than any human being in history. More than Rockefeller. More than Morgan. More than any dictator. One company. 12 people. $9.2 trillion in voting power. This is not conspiracy theory. This is financial reality. And it's perfectly legal. Mechanism 3. The cult of passive aggression. Vanguard's founder John Bogle died in 2019, but his philosophy became scripture. The current high priests, CEO Tim Buckley, President Greg Davis, and the index overlords, follow one commandment: never, ever rock the boat. Vanguard almost always votes with management, 96% of the time in 2024. Why? Because rocking the boat is bad for the index. High CEO pay? Good for the index. Vote yes. Massive stock buybacks that juice the price? Good for the index. Vote yes. Pouring billions into shareholder payouts instead of R&D or workers? Good for the index. Vote yes. As long as the S&P 500 number goes up, more money floods into Vanguard funds. More money means Vanguard grows. Vanguard grows means more voting power. More voting power means even less reason to rock the boat. It is the perfect self-licking ice cream cone. Vanguard is not passive investing. It is passive aggression on a planetary scale. The less Vanguard does, the richer and more powerful Vanguard becomes. Mechanism 4. The regulatory sainthood shield. Vanguard never gets investigated, never gets protested, never gets called before Congress. Why would it? It is the low-cost hero. Elizabeth Warren tweets praise for Vanguard's fees. Bernie Sanders calls it the good guy on Wall Street. Financial journalists write love letters about how Vanguard democratized investing. That universal love is the ultimate force field. When antitrust scholars finally noticed common ownership destroying competition, who did they point at? BlackRock and Larry Fink. Never Vanguard. BlackRock has a public CEO, a public stock, and a public villain. Vanguard has no public face, no profit motive on paper, and the permanent halo of St. Bogle. So regulators look the other way. Vanguard's former executives quietly fill second and third-tier posts at the SEC, Treasury, and Federal Reserve. They don't need the revolving door to swing fast. They already own the moral high ground. When the Department of Justice finally opened a common ownership probe in 2023, guess whose data they couldn't get? Vanguard's. Because Vanguard is owned by its investors, it claims giving detailed voting records would violate privacy. The monopoly that hides behind the little guy to protect the biggest guy. The most powerful institution in the world is also the most untouchable, perfectly legal, and growing every single day. Mechanism 5. The hidden hand that moves the other hands. Vanguard does not need scandals. It does not need flashy ads. It does not need to appear on CNBC. It only needs one thing: to stay invisible while everything else becomes visible. Every time BlackRock or Larry Fink is dragged into the spotlight, the real owner quietly tightens its grip. Every time State Street makes a headline about responsible investing, Vanguard's voting bloc silently decides the actual outcome. Every time a politician screams, "Break up the big banks," or "regulate hedge funds," Vanguard's $9.2 trillion shadow is never mentioned. Because Vanguard is not a bank. It is not a hedge fund. It is not even a normal corporation. It is a mutual structure that claims to belong to its investors, while its investors have zero actual control. This is the ultimate sleight of hand. The hand that owns the stock is never the hand that gets blamed. The hand that casts 172 million votes per year is never the hand that gets investigated. The hand that owns BlackRock itself is never the hand that gets pointed at. 5 mechanisms working together. 1. Common ownership that kills competition. 2. Proxy voting that silences shareholders. 3. Passive aggression that rewards bad management. 4. Sainthood that deflects regulation. 5. Invisibility that weaponizes the other 4. No previous monopoly ever had all 5 at once. Standard Oil had vertical control, but it was visible and illegal. JP Morgan had board control, but it was personal and banned. IG Farben had industrial control, but it was criminal and dismantled. Vanguard has ownership control across every industry, every competitor, every country, and it is praised, protected, and perfectly legal. This is not conspiracy theory. This is the legal structure of 21st century finance, and it is accelerating. Now let me show you the part that breaks people's minds. The part that turns anger into existential dread. The part that gets clipped, shared, and screamed about in comments for years. The part that proves, once and for all, that Vanguard is not just another player. It is the final boss. The circular ownership matrix. The glitch you can't unsee. Get ready, because once I say it slowly, you will never think about money the same way again. Let me say this slowly. Who owns Vanguard? Its funds. Who owns the funds? You and 50 million other investors. Who owns the largest stakes in every company inside those funds? Vanguard. Now watch. Vanguard owns 8.7% of BlackRock. BlackRock owns 7.1% of Apple. Apple's largest shareholder is Vanguard. Vanguard owns 8.9% of Microsoft. Microsoft's largest shareholder is Vanguard. Vanguard owns 8.8% of JP Morgan. JP Morgan's largest shareholder is Vanguard. The same pattern repeats in every single company you can name. Vanguard is the top shareholder of State Street. State Street is a top shareholder of Vanguard's largest funds. BlackRock is a top shareholder of State Street. It is a perfect closed loop. 3 firms, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, collectively own 22 to 25% of every S&P 500 company on average. And they own each other. They vote together more than 90% of the time through the same 2 proxy advisory firms, ISS and Glass Lewis. This is not 3 separate companies. This is one coordinated ownership cartel wearing 3 different masks. the monster that actually owns BlackRock and everything else. Once you see the circle, you can't unsee it. Welcome to the Matrix. Population, everyone who thought they owned something. Who profits from the Vanguard Matrix? First, the high priests. CEO Tim Buckley quietly collected $19 million last year while charging you 0.03%. The top 20 Vanguard executives share hundreds of millions annually, paid for by the microscopic fees on $9.2 trillion. Second, the cartel itself. Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street extract roughly $35 billion a year in total fees while doing little more than pressing copy the index. Third, corporate management. CEOs love Vanguard. Vanguard almost never votes against them, 96% support. Golden parachutes, stock buybacks, private jets, all approved. Now who loses? You. You think you own stocks. You own a claim. Vanguard owns the reality and votes away your voice. Consumers lose. Airline tickets, bank fees, prescription drugs. Everything you buy is 3 to 12% more expensive because competition is dead. Workers lose. Studies show wages are suppressed 8 to 12% in industries dominated by the big three. When the same owners control Walmart, Target, Amazon, and Costco, they don't bid up your salary. They keep labor cheap across the board. Small businesses lose. You can't compete against giants backed by $9.2 trillion of permanent capital. Democracy loses. 12 people in Pennsylvania have more real power over corporate America than the entire United States Congress. Capitalism itself loses. This is not capitalism. This is corporate socialism for the index giants and brutal feudalism for everyone else. You are not an owner. You are a serf with a better app. The shift to passive is not slowing down. It is exploding. In 2010, passive funds controlled 19% of the U.S. equity market. In 2025, passive owns 58%. Morgan Stanley now predicts 70 to 75% by 2030. Goldman Sachs says 80% by 2034. Some analysts whisper 90% by 2040. Every single year, hundreds of billions flow out of expensive active funds and into Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Why? Because active managers lose to the index 92% of the time over 10 years. Because Vanguard charges 0.03% and the others are forced to match. Because your 401k auto-enrolls you into a target date fund that is 90% Vanguard. It feels rational for you. It is suicidal for the system. The feedback loop is now unbreakable. More money, cheaper fees, more money, more voting power, less competition, higher corporate profits, higher index, even more money. By 2034, Vanguard alone could manage $20 trillion. By 2040, the big three could control absolute voting majorities in almost every public company in America. Not minority stakes, majorities. At that point, the game ends. There will be no meaningful corporate elections, no hostile takeovers, no activist investors who can win. Just one permanent owner class. And you will still be told you own something. You won't. You never did. The greatest wealth transfer in history is already in its final stage. And it's perfectly legal. So what can you actually do? You have exactly 3 options. Option 1. Accept the matrix and profit from it. Keep buying VO, VTI, VT, every Vanguard ETF. Ride the monster. If you can't beat the cartel, join the cartel. Your portfolio will grow while the world burns. Morally neutral. Emotionally easy. Financially optimal. Option 2. Divest and fight with your wallet. Sell every index fund and ETF controlled by the big three. Buy individual stocks and demand direct registration, DRS, so your shares are in your name, not street name. Or move to the few remaining active funds that still vote against the machine. It will cost you higher fees. You will probably underperform the index for years. But you keep your voting rights, and you starve the beast $1 at a time. Harder. Principled. Lonely. Option 3. Political warfare. Demand pass-through voting. Force Vanguard to send you your proxy ballots so you vote your own shares. Demand real antitrust enforcement against common ownership. Demand the breakup of the big three the same way Standard Oil was broken up. Write your senator. Support any politician who actually understands this issue. Most people still don't see it. But once enough people see the circle, reform becomes unstoppable. Choose one. Choose two. Choose all 3. But choose. Because doing nothing guarantees Vanguard's $9 trillion becomes $20 trillion. Its 8% becomes 15%. Its minority control becomes absolute control. And the illusion that you ever owned anything disappears forever. Vanguard is not evil. John Bogle is not the devil. Its employees are not plotting in basements. They are simply operating inside a system that is perfectly legal and perfectly destructive. A system that turned the greatest democratization of investing into the greatest concentration of ownership in human history. In 1975, Vanguard did not exist. In 2025, it owns BlackRock and everything else. By 2040, it could own the majority of public wealth on Earth. And it did it with your money. Welcome to the world Vanguard built. Population, everyone. Once you see the circle, you can't unsee it. Vanguard, the $9 trillion monster that actually owns BlackRock and everything else. Population, everyone.